If you are sitting inside this sea-facing building right now, surrounded by the elegant arches of a Victorian-era colonial landmark, sipping a fine afternoon tea, or perhaps cutting into a thick, juicy steak, I need you to put down your knife and fork. Look around you. Look at the foreign tourists laughing in the sunlight. Their cold beers glistening in the sea breeze. Their faces relaxed and completely at ease. Their smiles and this very building you are sitting inside are telling you a beautiful, terrible lie. This may be the most perfect disguise in all of Hong Kong's history. To your eyes, this is a charming colonial landmark. It is the most romantic waterfront photo spot in the seaside village of Stanley. Travel websites are filled with glowing reviews praising the relaxed vibes and stunning views. But buried deep inside the sealed archives of history, every single granite slab beneath your feet was once completely soaked in human blood. This romantic ocean view restaurant 80 years ago was a slaughterhouse. Let us pull the hands of the clock back, all the way back to 1846, over 170 years ago. At that time, Mary Host did not stand here at the edge of the sea in Stanley. It rose proudly in the very heart of Hong Kong, in the district of Central, as one of the oldest and most magnificent public buildings of its era. It was named after a senior British colonial military commander, Sir George Murray, and it carried the full weight of the British Empire's dignity in the Far East. Picture the thing. Enormous Roman-style arched colonnades, wide, open verandas built to catch the tropical breeze, and at the very top, a roof of Chinese red tiles. In a curious fusion of East and West, this building was the exclusive residential quarters of British military officers. In those golden years, the colonnades echoed with the conversations of senior commanders. The air was thick with the scent of cigars and whiskey. Murray House was a symbol of unshakable British imperial power in the Orient. The men who lived there could never have imagined what this place would become in the century that followed. In December of 1941, the darkest chapter in Hong Kong's history began. The city fell. The British surrendered. As the boots of the Imperial Japanese Army marched into Central, the fate of Murray House was twisted beyond recognition. The Japanese Military High Command selected this elegant building for a terrifying purpose. It became the headquarters of the Kempitai, the Imperial Japanese Military Police. If you know anything about the history of the Second World War, you understand what that name means. The Kempitai were the secret police of the Japanese Empire, functioning in much the same way as the Gestapo did for Nazi Germany. Their mission across the entire Asia-Pacific region was singular and brutal: to suppress, interrogate, and eliminate all resistance by any means necessary. After the Kempita took over, the once spacious and comfortable officers' quarters were rapidly converted into sealed cells and torture chambers. Those thick granite walls, originally built to withstand typhoons, now served a far more sinister purpose. They were the perfect sound barrier, absorbing every scream, trapping every cry inside the stone. According to post-war historical records, survivor testimonies, and the conservative estimates of historians, Murray House witnessed some of the most extreme acts of brutality in all of human history during those 3 years and 8 months of Japanese occupation. The Kempeitai employed every method of torture imaginable within these walls, including water-based suffocation, electric torture, and savage physical violence. Countless innocent civilians and underground resistance fighters were dragged inside, blindfolded, and were never seen again. Historians estimate that approximately 4,000 Hong Kong people in the very floors where you are now taking photographs and sipping your coffee were tortured to death, and some were even executed in the corridors. 4,000 lives. Their despair, their agony, and their terror seeped deep into every crack of every stone in Murray House. In 1945, the war finally ended. Japan surrendered unconditionally. The British reclaimed Hong Kong. Murray House was scrubbed clean on the surface. The visible traces of blood were removed. The building became a government office block once more. Around 1962, approximately 200 civil servants from the Rating and Valuation Department were assigned to work inside Murray House. On the surface, life returned to normal. The living came to work. The city moved forward. But the staff inside very quickly discovered that something had clearly never left. Beginning in the early 1960s, a series of terrifying incidents that defied all rational explanation began to circulate among the civil servants, each account more disturbing than the last. It started with the corridors at night. Multiple security guards and staff working late reported that on the empty, silent colonnades, a sound would suddenly begin. A perfectly synchronized rhythm of heavy boots on stone. Not the footsteps of an ordinary person, but the marching cadence of soldiers in military boots, locked in the unmistakable, bone-chilling drill step of Japanese Imperial troops. The sound would travel from a distance, drawing closer, approaching your door, one step at a time, and then, without warning, it would vanish into absolute silence. No one there. No shadow. Only the dead darkness at the end of the corridor. Then there was the bathroom. A female civil servant was using the bathroom when she noticed a shadow fall across the gap beneath the door. She assumed a colleague was waiting outside, and she called out. No response. She leaned down and looked through the gap beneath the door. There was a pair of feet standing outside, wearing old-fashioned leather shoes. But above the ankles, there was nothing. No legs, no body. Nothing from the waist up whatsoever. Then came the heavy wooden doors. The solid wooden doors, lining the colonnades of Murray. house would suddenly slam open and shut violently with tremendous force in rooms where there was absolutely no wind. It was as if invisible hands were striking them with full strength. Some staff tried locking the doors shut with heavy bolts. The next morning, they would arrive to find the doors wide open, documents scattered across the floor, and confidential architectural drawings torn to shreds, with no sign of any forced entry. And then there were the sounds inside the walls. Not only at night, even in the middle of the working day, staff would suddenly stop what they were doing, because from somewhere deep inside the stone walls, a low, relentless sound would emerge. Not a pipe, not the settling of the building, a human sound, screaming, weeping, the sound of extreme suffering that had been sealed inside the granite for over 2 decades, slowly, steadily, leading back through the stone. The panic spread through the government building like a disease. Large numbers of Chinese civil servants were pushed to the edge of psychological breakdown. They refused to work overtime. They refused to stay in the office alone. Some issued collective threats to go on strike or to resign entirely. And Z placed the British colonial government, an institution that prided itself on reason, science, and the rule of law, in a position of extraordinary embarrassment. You can govern the living with law, but how do you govern 4,000 restless, angry souls? In the end, history witnessed the most absurd and yet most genuine act of compromise imaginable. In 1963, the British colonial government, for the first and the only time in its entire history, officially approved a formal supernatural intervention. 56 Buddhist monks in saffron robes were formally invited into this symbol of British imperial power. They moved between the office desks, lighting incense, striking wooden fish drums, chanting sutras, and performing a ceremony of peace for the 4,000 souls who had never found rest. In the entire history of the British Empire, this was an event without parallel. But the ceremony did not fully silence the anger of the dead. In the years that followed, the supernatural incidents eased somewhat, but they never truly stopped. The civil servants of Murray House learned one unspoken rule: never be alone inside this building after dark. The years passed. By 1982, Hong Kong was entering an era of explosive economic growth. The land in Central was more valuable than almost anywhere on Earth. To make way for the construction of the iconic Bank of China Tower, the site of Murray House had to be cleared. The colonial government was not willing to simply demolish a building this historically significant, and perhaps not entirely eager to disturb whatever was still living inside it. So they devised a plan that was by any measure unprecedented and borderline insane. They would take the entire building apart, piece by piece. Construction workers dismantled Murray House like a colossal jigsaw puzzle, removing every brick, every granite column, every stone slab with careful, methodical precision. Every component, over 3,000 individual pieces in total, was manually assigned a number, photographed and catalogued in detail. These 3,000 stones soaked in bloody memory, witnesses to the screaming of the dying, were then loaded onto trucks and transported to a remote government storage facility near Titan Reservoir in the wilderness far from the city. In that dark, humid warehouse, these 3,000 stones rested like imprisoned souls, sealed away for exactly 20 years, until 2002, when the restoration project was finally launched. The stones were transported to the Stanley waterfront. Workers, following the numbers assigned decades earlier, reassembled Murray House piece by piece, like the world's most disturbing puzzle. It was a miracle of architectural heritage conservation. But wait, the story is not over. In fact, the part that will make your skin crawl has only just begun. When the construction workers were taking inventory of the 3,000 components in the Titan warehouse, they discovered a problem. The original ventilation chimney structures from the roof of Murray House, those same chimneys that had stood witness to the entire Japanese occupation, that had absorbed the heat of 4,000 deaths from below, were gone. After 20 years in a remote wilderness warehouse, exposed to humidity and neglect, the chimneys had simply vanished, as if they had decided on their own that they would not be coming back. Faced with this problem, the officials overseeing the reconstruction made a decision, in retrospect, sends a chill through anyone who learns of it. They went out and found another set of chimneys to use as replacements. And the source of those replacement chimneys was the Sayingpan Mental Hospital. On High Street. In local legend, it is simply known as the High Street Haunted House. If you know Hong Kong's supernatural history, you'll understand what that name carries with it. The Sayingpan Mental Hospital, built in 1892, began as the nurses' quarters of the College of Medicine for Chinese in Hong Kong. It later served for decades as a psychiatric facility, housing the most severely mentally ill patients of the colonial era. Inside those walls lived the most broken, most desperate, most tormented minds in Hong Kong's history. Every stone in that building had absorbed decades of screaming, of grief, of madness, of profound despair. When the hospital was eventually demolished, large quantities of its original architectural materials were left behind. And then, among those materials were 8 chimneys. 8 chimneys from the most haunted psychiatric hospital in the Hong Kong were transported and physically installed on the rooftop of Murray House, where they remain to this day. The very chimneys you would look up at if you walked outside right now. Take a moment. Think about the full picture of what you have just learned. A building disbanded 3 years and 8 months functioning as a torture facility, where 4,000 living people were put to death 4,000 souls carrying extreme trauma. Whose restless anger so overwhelmed this building that 50 Ts Buddhist monks were brought in an official government ceremony, and still could not bring them complete peace. This building's stones were sealed in a wilderness warehouse for 20 years, then brought back to life by the sea in Stanley, and on its crown, planted like a permanent spiritual lightning rod, are 8 chimneys from a facility that housed the most shattered minds and most tortured souls in Hong Kong's institutional history. 4,000 people tortured to death by the Imperial Japanese Military Police, added to the accumulated anguish, madness, and sorrow of generations of the mentally afflicted. The 2 most spiritually charged locations in all of Hong Kong's history of darkness have, without fanfare, without ceremony, without anyone fully realizing what was happening, completed the most terrifying physical union imaginable. Here, in this sun-drenched spot by the sea, beneath the cheerful roof of a restaurant where tourists order steak and take happy photographs, an architect will tell you that if you number 3,000 stones and reassemble them in the correct sequence, you can perfectly recreate the physical form of a historical building. But there is one thing the architect will not tell you. You can dismantle a building. You can number it. You can move it. You can reassemble it. But the things that have attached themselves to the stone, deep in the grain of the granite, cannot be numbered. They cannot be moved with the stone. And they certainly do not require a permit to relocate. The next time you find yourself inside Murray House, sitting at one of those beautifully set tables, with a glass of wine in your hand and the ocean glittering outside the window, look up. Look at the chimneys on the roof. Then, listen carefully to the wooden floor beneath your feet. Perhaps that is not simply the sound of old timber shifting with age. Perhaps it is a soul from 1941 trying one more time to get your attention. Or perhaps turn and look at the empty chair beside you, because maybe it has not been empty for very long. If you enjoy these stories that pull back the curtain on the darkest corners of history and reveal the terrifying truths hidden beneath beautiful surfaces, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. And please leave a comment below and tell us, now that you know the truth about those 8 chimneys, now that you know everything this building has witnessed and everything it still carries inside its stone, do you still dare to sit down for dinner at Murray House? We will see you in the next one.